My next guest is a political consultant, a Fox News commentator, a former White House press secretary, and the author of a brand new book called Speaking for Myself: Faith, Freedom, and the Fight of Our Lives Inside the Trump White House. She also happens to be my daughter. Please welcome Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I think you brought a fan club with you.
I think I'm going to take them with me.
It's always so funny when I have a guest that gets 14 times the love that the host gets. I just want to throw that out there. But as long as you're doing that for my daughter, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. Hey, this is, and I'm saying this not just as a father, but as the reader of the book. It is a fantastic insight into what we never, ever hear about President Trump and what really goes on in the White House. So there have been so many books about President Trump and the White House, most of them written very negatively. What's different about this story?
Well, I think for starters, I had an insight that most people would never have access to. I spent 3.5 years working for the president, 2.5 in the White House, and nearly every single day of my 12, 14, 16-hour days, I spent most of that time at the president's side, watching him talk with foreign leaders, watching him interact with his family. I got to see him in a way that very few Americans get to see. And for 2.5 years, I spoke on behalf of the president, and this is my turn to tell my side of the story and show the country who this man is behind the scenes, the generous, the kind, the compassionate person that he is, and also give people a chance to know who I am, why I wanted to work in the Trump White House, and why I loved the job that I had.
You mean the pictures of Donald Trump that we get from CNN and MSNBC aren't necessarily accurate depictions of him?
I know that's very hard to believe, given their level of accuracy in their news reporting. And that was why I felt like this book was so important, because I did have the opportunity to see the president in those key consequential moments as he's making really difficult decisions. And I got to see his heart. And you don't often, in fact, I don't think you ever see that portrayed in the media. And I felt like it was important for America to know who Donald Trump is and why he is doing what he's doing and why he's willing to do it so often on his own.
What is it about President Trump that the average American simply does not know that you could tell us from having been at his side for as long as you were?
You know, one of the things that he gets attacked for so often is that he's not a nice guy, maybe he's too tough, and certainly I don't think that most people would claim that he's the champion of women that the Democrats always try to come after him for. And I saw the opposite. I saw somebody who empowered women, who fought for us, who stood up for us, who defended us when I was under constant attack from liberals. As you know, nothing was off limits, whether it was my character or how I felt about something, my weight, my appearance, my fitness as a mother. Everything was on the table.
What kind of pie you made.
Exactly, or whether I didn't make the pie. Everything was on the table for liberals to attack. But the president actually stood up for me, defended me, and empowered me to do my job and trusted me to carry his message to the world, which was a pretty big responsibility.
You were viciously attacked at a restaurant in Virginia. You'd gone there to eat with your husband, children, and in-laws, and the owner actually asked you to leave, threw you out of the restaurant. And that resulted in some nasty stuff that happened, death threats, requiring, as the first press secretary ever to require Secret Service protection. There was an incident you describe in the book that I think is just powerful. I did not know about this until I read the book. There are a lot of things. Actually, there are a lot of stuff I didn't know about till I read this book, to be honest with you. Really get to know my daughter this way.
For better or worse, I guess.
But, you know, it was a very special moment. And the president had an opportunity right after all that happened when you were in Japan. What happened? Tell that story.
So this was a moment, frankly, it was a pretty low moment for me personally. I had been attacked by an LA Times reporter for my appearance. I had been kicked out of a restaurant. I'd been attacked at the White House Correspondents' Dinner as their guest, sitting at the head table. And I was not having the best couple of weeks of my life. and we had been traveling. Even my own husband didn't really know how to address kind of all the negativity that I was taking on. And we were walking into a meeting with Prime Minister Abe, and the president had every reason in the world to be focused on that meeting. But he just sensed something. He grabbed me, he said, hold on a second. He grabbed me, he turned me in the hall, he looked me directly in the eye, and he said, Sarah, the reason that they attack you is because you're good at your job. You're smart, you're beautiful. Do not let them get you down. And I was just kind of taken aback and astonished that he recognized in that moment that I needed a second and I needed somebody to empower me, and he did that. And then he, in true Trump style, slapped me on the shoulder and said, now let's get back to work. And we immediately went into this bilateral meeting and started discussing, one of the most significant trade deals in his presidency. But that was one of the things that I want people to understand about this president, that he loves the people around him. He fights for us. He empowers us. And that's what he's trying to do for every American every single day he steps into that office.
There were some nasty books that were written, mostly by people that he let go and fired and that didn't work out. Some of them claimed that they were real experts and knew what was going on. They had nowhere near the access. I doubt there was a single member of the White House staff that was in the president's presence and in the Oval Office more than you were on a day-to-day basis. So is that what is different about what you're writing about in your book?
I think that's a huge difference. Is I saw him in every aspect of his presidency and every aspect of his personal life. On the golf course, or interacting with the First Lady, and also interacting with world leaders from Kim Jong-un to President Xi to, again, Prime Minister Abe. I saw him in these moments. I sat with him when he made phone calls to parents who had lost a soldier that had been serving overseas in Afghanistan. I saw him become vulnerable in those moments. And I really want people to understand who this president is, how much he loves this country. And I think I do a pretty good job of that, if I do say so myself, in this book. And
no, I
hope people will read it and learn about.
I think it's a spectacular insight, and you tell so many vivid stories, things that we've never heard. A lot of things that, even though I'm your dad, you never told me. And before we let you go, one of the stories that touched me most was when you were with the president. It was not a public trip, but he went to Walter Reed time after time, and he visited with wounded warriors. I want you to describe the president going to those places, because he didn't even tell the press. He didn't do it for show. Tell about that.
There were a number of moments. One of the things that I love about this president is how much he loves our men and women in uniform, and how dedicated he is to the people that allow us to live in the greatest country on the face of the planet. And he would take these moments, he would go into these hospital rooms and visit one-on-one with soldiers who had been injured, who had come back. He would sit with their families, and I think really just open himself up in a way that you don't get to see on the cameras. The president has very much a tough guy persona, and I think he likes that and usually prefers that. But these moments, you really got to just see his love of country and his love for the people who allow us to live in it. And it's a really special thing to watch.
I can't end without asking, we saw the combat sometimes that would happen in the White House briefing room.
Sometimes.
Surely there were some reporters in there that were actually polite and pleasant and professional. I'm not going to ask you to name the ones that weren't. Some of them we pretty well know.
I write about those.
Yeah, you do. And I think it's very important that you do. You tell us about those people. But give me a couple of people that really were professional that we ought to recognize as being maybe not the nastiest people in the world when they're in that room.
The White House press corps are some of the toughest, smartest, most shrewd journalists in the country. That's why they're assigned to the White House. That's why they're there to cover the president. And despite the back and forth we all had a job to do. And I think a lot of times we had a mutual respect that we had very different jobs that were important to our democracy. And I had a very good working relationship with a number of reporters. I'd love to name names, and I'm thinking about whether or not I want to, but I'm afraid I might ruin their careers. If I say something good about a reporter, it may hurt both of us. But there were, I think, a lot more good people that were trying to do a good job and trying to write good stories than there were bad. Unfortunately, the bad ones are usually the loudest and
Yeah.
get the most coverage. And certainly, I think on places like CNN and MSNBC, they give full stage to those individuals to attack the president. And so often, it's not news anymore, it's commentary.
Yeah.
And that line has been so blended. And I think that is one of the most dangerous things about where we are in the news industry, in the media empire, is we've got to go back to separating news from commentary. And no place is that harder to find than in the White House covering this president.
Well, even if I was not your dad, although I am, so therefore I was going to love this book, I'm sure anyway. But I was blown away by the detail and also the personal story. I think it's a great book, not only for political people. This is a great book for young Christian women who are trying to raise a family, because you talk about that struggle and how God used even people to pray for you. So it's not just a book about the White House and politics, but about your own spiritual walk and how God gave you comfort. So there's so many people, I think, that are going to find this book a really strong revelation. I thank you for writing it. And thank you, by the way, for giving me a copy, because if you didn't, you would not be invited back to the Thanksgiving table.
I even say some pretty nice things about you in there. That's probably why he's plugging the book.
That's the reason
so well.
to get the book, the nice things. Nobody says these nice things about me, but it is a beautiful book. And the book is called Speaking for Myself, Faith, Freedom, and the Fight of Our Lives Inside the Trump White House. It is already a #1 bestseller on Amazon. It is also available at all great bookstores. So if you also want to keep up with the author on social media, follow at Sarah Huckabee on Twitter and at Sarah Huckabee Sanders on Instagram.